My question is to the Minister of Finance. Does he stand by his statement to Morning Report on the 18th of June when he said $4.8 million appropriated? Yeah, he is quite funny to look at, but let's focus on the question, Mr English. Can I start again, Mr Speaker? There's been an unusual interchange on the other bench.
Order.
They're a little unsettled.
Order. Order. I will invite the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to start again. Thank him. Thank you.
Mr Speaker, does he stand by his statement to Morning Report on the 18th of June when he said the $4.8 million appropriated to the Pacific Economic Development Agency would be contestable?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes, what I said was the money will be contestable if the purchase agreement cannot be reached satisfactorily. I would expect officials will look at the same issues with this contract as they would with any, that is the capacity to deliver, the ability to collaborate, accountability and how to measure outcomes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary. Why did he claim that the appropriation would be contestable when the leaked memo of the 25th of March 2010 from the Ministry for Pacific Island Affairs states explicitly that the Minister of Finance had made it clear that PETA was to be the preferred provider for the delivery of these initiatives?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as the member will be aware from his time as a minister, there's an appropriation process and then there is a contracting process, and the contracting process will focus on achieving what the government wants to achieve out of this, and that is jobs and skills for young Pacific Islanders. Because the member may not be aware, they are the group most affected by the recession, and we need to take positive initiatives to keep them connected to the workplace.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Is it point of order?
Mr Speaker, you'll recall that the question was, why did he say it was contestable when this memo stated that this organisation was to be the preferred provider, which is a contradiction to what the Minister had claimed. The Minister gave a long discourse about what he was doing, but he never answered the question.
Well, with respect, well, hold on a moment. With respect, I think the Minister said this was a normal appropriation process that was involved here. Now, the members can question him further on that, whether they accept that as a reasonable answer or not, but I think it is an answer to the question asked. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, how could this, as a normal process, be an answer to an either-or question?
That's the members are exactly asking a further question, and the person to direct the questions to is the Minister. And that's exactly what supplementary questions are all about. Members have every right not to be satisfied with the answer given, and if they're not satisfied with the answer given, question the Minister more about it. Pin him down. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Why did the Minister of Finance ignore the Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs advice that the projects promoted by PETA, quote, overlap with many programs that are currently being run by the Pacific Business Trust and other local and central government programs?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the advice wasn't ignored. The government always takes some notice of officials' advice. This was, though, a unique proposition, and it's focused on achieving something that I think even the member would like to achieve, and that is to help to lift the skills of young Pacific Islanders and keep them connected to the world of work so that as the economy recovers, they can get jobs.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, why did the Minister of Finance decide to appropriate the money to PETA, notwithstanding the fact that the Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs drew his attention to the fact that this was not an agency that had delivered on any projects of note? This was an agency that had no track record. This was an agency that was untested and unproven, that the experience of the ministry was that local and central government agencies had found that PETA didn't work well with other groups, and when the advice from the ministry to him was that this contradicted government procedures for tendering processes.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, look, officials are often cautious and that is their job. But as the Minister knows, the appropriation didn't create any obligation to pay any money to anybody. And that is why right now officials are going through a process to ensure that young Pacific Islanders will get the benefit of an investment of government money in further skills and better opportunities to get jobs. And in the end, I think the member will find that both the Pacific community and even the Labour Party will come round to support doing something active for those young New Zealanders.
Katrina Shanks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, why did the government make an appropriation in Budget 2010 to help young Pacific people?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, unemployment among young Pacific people is 14.4% among Pacific people and even higher among young Pacific people. The government simply has to take some positive initiatives to ensure that we don't end up with one in 5 young Pacific Islanders disconnected from the workforce with no skills. That would be a bad legacy from a recession.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, how does the Minister justify his claim to the House on the 23rd of June that the PETA agreement would, quote, meet all the requirements of accountability and transparency, end quote, when the process of deciding that they would get the money was anything but transparent, and when the only legal requirement in the budget is of self-reporting rather than the more usual and certainly the more stringent reporting requirements set out under Section 32A of the Public Finance Act?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think the member has asked that question about 3 times, and the member's trying to describe a contract that has not yet been negotiated or completed. The contract with this organisation or any other organisation will go through exactly the same process as every other public contract. And I might say at the end of it, we will be very pleased to see arrangements that are going to help young Pacific Islanders get skills and get jobs. And I'm surprised the Labour Party is so opposed to that.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, was Inga Tuigamala, an aspirant national candidate, at any point involved in discussions with him or Mr Key in relation to the PETA proposal?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, was the reason that PETA was granted the appropriation against all officials' advice and in a totally non-transparent manner because it was mired by party political considerations rather than being motivated by how best and most effectively to deliver the services needed by the Pacifica community?
The Honourable Bill English.
No, Mr Speaker, and it doesn't matter how often the Labour Party says that, it is simply not true. It is motivated by the need to stop doing what Labour did for years, which is talk endlessly, write strategies and hold workshops, and actually turn the aspirations of the wider Pacific community into some real change for some real young people with real needs.
Question number 2, Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question